Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Gavin Aspden. I hope that's right. A leader, it wasn't. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Gavin Aspden, a leader whose career reflects a deep commitment to growth, inclusion, and development across many spheres. Gavin is a partner at PwC's Academy in Dubai, where he designs and delivers training in areas ranging from financial reporting and risk to leadership, sustainability, and behavioural skills. With over 25 years of experience, he's trained more than 30,000 professionals across 5,000 organisations, always with a person-first, development-focused approach. His global journey includes senior roles at ICAEW, academic leadership at BPP, and advisory work with military and sporting organisations. Whether coaching executive teams, rugby squads, or martial arts, Gavin brings insight, empathy, and an unwavering passion for helping others grow. Values that are deeply aligned with neurodivergent affirming practices. Gavin, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited, a little bit nervous. And whenever I hear myself introduced and I sort of realise, I think what it boils down to is I'm quite old. So I've done lots of different things in almost different careers. But yes, that was a very good and disturbing summary of what I've done in my life so far.
So I'll start today with, I suppose, what a personal definition or meaning for neurodivergence is for you.
I guess it's quite difficult, I think, to answer that in very simple terms from a scientifically technical correct answer perspective. So I'll answer it using the ignorance of my life. That neurodivergent to me is basically just people that think differently. The rationale or reasons why they think differently can vary, whether it's brain chemistry or otherwise. But in the grand scheme of things, neurodiversity is just people that think differently to each other. And I've always tried to surround myself with people that think differently to me. I think if you surround yourselves with people that always think the same way that you do, you end up with one idea that everyone thinks is amazing that almost inevitably fails. If you surround yourselves by people that think differently, you get the challenge that your customers, your market, your staff, you get the challenges that the real world is going to put in front of you, and you can go in prepared. So I really value people who think differently to me and who will tell me when they think I'm wrong.
Wow, I love that. Really, really love that. So would you say that's a draw in for you when you meet someone who thinks different, that you would say, okay, you're the right fit here?
Yes and no, because there is a caveat to all of that in terms of whether I'm any good at identifying people that think differently to me. I think, when you start talking about diversity and inclusion, and we have lots of internal training on it, and I've studied it quite extensively, and at the end of the day, human beings are predisposed to surround themselves by people who look like them, think like them, and act like them. That's who we find a comfortable space with. So I'm not kind of at the extreme where I will interview someone and go, yes, I don't like this person, so therefore I should hire them. So I definitely
That's
feel
not what
that.
I mean.
I definitely feel that I am a little bit biased towards people who have a similar way of thinking to me, but I try not to be. So I encourage my team to disagree with me as long as they do it professionally. But it is quite interesting. And I think, if you take marriage as a really bad example of that, it's kind of, they say opposites attract. But I found is opposites attract initially and then they start to really annoy. So actually you end up kind of, the initial attraction is there, but then you realize that you don't like going for walks in the woods and you don't like doing this, that, and the other, and there's a reason why you don't like it. And after the initial phase is over, you move into that phase of going, okay, you go for a walk in the woods, I'm going to watch TV. So there has to be similarities and interest, but I think extreme opposites can irritate more than they help. So it's not looking for people who think opposite to you. I think it's people whose thought process is different, and that is where I've kind of refined my thinking over the years. I like to understand people's thought process, not that they necessarily get to a different answer, but I just like them to get to an answer in a different way to me.
Wow. The bit there that actually intrigued me was the partnership, because I think everything is a relationship, whether it's marriage and business. It's all about, communication and understanding each other. But that part where you said, initially there's that draw in and I want to go for this walk in the woods with you. And then after a period of time, it's like, yeah, well, you go for the walk in the woods. I'm going to just chill here. Why do you think that is, that it changes in time?
Um, I think, I mean, it is opposite is attractive. Doing something different is attractive. But I think, and again, without wanting to go too far down the relationship thing, I think in early stages in any relationship, people like to show off, and they like to be different, and they're trying to impress. And I think, and as time goes on, whether it's a work relationship or a personal relationship, I think we eventually slow down in wanting to impress the other person. I mean, it's quite funny, and again, I'm going to attribute this to someone who I worked with many years ago. But she was a lovely girl, and she'd been married for 2 or 3 years, and someone was making a comment to her, oh, you're still in the honeymoon phase. And she was like, yeah, and I'm going to stay in the honeymoon phase for the whole of my married life. And everyone was like laughing. And she said, no, she said, I am always going to make an effort. I'm always going to dress nicely. I'm always going to go to the gym. I'm always going to do this. And she said, and he's going to do the same. And it's like, we were sort of joking, saying, well, does he know that that's the plan for him? And she was like, yeah, we've talked about it, that we're going to try and stay in that first phase of the relationship where we are constantly trying to impress each other. And if you think about that in the context of you starting a new job, if you're starting a new job, you're trying to impress people. You're trying to prove that hiring you was the right decision to make. So all the things that you said in your interview, you try to live up to. All of the capabilities that you've told them you have, you try to live up to. What worries me in the workplace is when I see people start to drop off that trying to impress. So showing off, trying to impress, they're not completely different. One of them is positive. One of them, I think, is if you're trying to show off, that's a little bit negative. I think it was, I don't think it was Oscar Wilde, but I keep telling people it was Oscar Wilde who said, when you die, people should ask why there isn't a statue for you rather than why there is one. Yeah, that is just trying to get your name on everything. And ownership without accountability and responsibility is a very bad thing. But I looked for people who are trying to impress me by doing what they've promised. Now, that might sound quite simple. Generationally, there are challenges with that. But actually, people who will stand up and deliver what they've said they're going to deliver is very important. I think in a personal relationship, I think at the point where you stop making an effort for each other, whether it is the way you communicate, whether it's who does the washing up, whether it's what you wear, whether it's whatever, I think that is quite important. If you get home from work and, I wear a suit to work, I dress quite smart, I think I look pretty good. I'm sure I don't, but, I walk out the house
You
going,
look good.
Well, thank you. I fished for that quite badly, but that's fine. But, when I leave the house in the morning, I think, yeah, I'm looking smart and professional today. If I kind of get home from work, having been with people all day, and my wife is at home and she's been doing whatever she's been doing all day, very busy, we're both tired, and we both kind of like, get rid of the work clothes, put on an old battered rugby shirt and a pair of horrible shorts that probably needed to go in the wash a day earlier, and I sort of slouch on the sofa and kind of like grunt a few times and turn the TV on. It's like, who am I making effort for? I'm making effort for the people I work with, not for the people I love at home. So I'm a strong believer that, any relationship, personal or business-like, you should try and make an effort. And in the workplace, that effort is about trying to impress. And at home, it's about trying to impress.
Yeah.
And people talk about love languages and all that kind of stuff. I think that's an interpretation of it. But in terms of understanding what it is that impresses people. So my team know that if you want to impress me, just do your job. Do what I'm asking you to do and do it professionally, do it well. That will impress me. I'm not asking for a huge amount. At home, with my wife and my kids and things like that, yeah, what impresses my kids is when I spend money. That's just kind of like what happens. But
I'm sure it's not just that.
Well, I think it is sometimes with teenagers. But with my wife, it's like when I do the washing up without having to be asked to do the washing up. That scores points.
Yeah.
So I think there's different ways we communicate, but at the heart of it, it is about understanding how to impress and demonstrate that you're making an effort for other people that are in your life, whether it's colleagues, whether it's romantically or otherwise. I think it's about making effort.
But sometimes I feel like in both aspects, whether it's in our relationships, our personal relationships, or within our work environment, is there that, are we being chameleons in some sense? First we want that acceptance into something. So, is that walk in the woods something I never liked because I hate the cold and the damp and the whatever. But because I like this person so much, I put myself in that uncomfortable situation. But then I become comfortable, so I can sort of be my authentic self to a degree.
Mm.
And again, the same in the workplace. So sometimes I wonder, is it, where do we meet each other halfway? And it's important, I guess, I feel, before going into relationships or into the jobs we love, is to be our authentic selves, not to make statements that aren't true to us, things that we aren't capable of. I mean, it's you're a bit deceitful going into anything, whether it's professionally or romantically, if we're not truly honest from the get-go.
Mm. I think honesty is an interesting thing because honesty is transient. So values and morals are not, but honesty is. So I might say, I don't really like going for walks in the woods, but is it because I've never been for a walk in the woods with somebody who makes
Yeah.
me feel like I enjoy it? So I think when we talk about opposites attracting and things like that, I think sometimes there's a journey of discovery. And it could well be that 3 months later you go, no, I do actually not like going for a
Yes.
walk in the woods. Or you could be, actually, I've gone for a walk in the wood with somebody who it talks to me, or it's an opportunity to communicate. So it's not the walk in the wood that's the good bit, it's the communication that might be the good bit.
Yeah.
So, I work with a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, and being British, there's a kind of like a default thing, whereas let's go to the pub kind of thing for a social. And I've kind of like changed my approach now. Let's go for a coffee for a social. Let's go do something else that doesn't involve, that isn't sort of revolving around alcohol. And it was quite interesting that one of my team said that, one of the benefits of going to the pub is the level of relaxation that is involved, even if you're not drinking. And so actually a couple of the guys here who don't drink kind of like will come to the pub for a social, and they agree, yeah, it's just a relaxed atmosphere. So it's not, and they're not like morally opposed to it as such, but obviously they won't drink. No one tries to persuade them, oh, go on, just have one. We don't do that. But if we're going out and there's alcohol involved, they just kind of go, okay, these guys are going to drink. And they generally will leave before people start to get a little bit silly, which may be inevitable. But they're appreciating the atmosphere and the level of communication in that environment more so than they thought they would. They thought it was all about the alcohol when it isn't. It's actually partly about the alcohol, but actually more about letting your hair down, relaxing in a social environment with a game of pool or whatever else is going on in the pub. So it's kind of a weird direction to go in, but I think when you're in a new relationship, whether it's a work relationship or a personal relationship, I think we make an effort to impress. And you may find that you discover something that actually you didn't really know that you were going to enjoy. And then that becomes your new honesty. So it's not that you're being inauthentic, it's just you're willing to try different things to try and impress. And then you go, well, actually, I do actually have some skills in that area, which I was unaware of before. I do have a natural ability in this aspect of a job. You may never have done sales before, but you suddenly find yourself, actually, I'm quite good at it. Yeah. If I'd have spoken to you in the interview, you say, no, I've not really got much experience of sales. You say, well, will you give it a shot? You go, yeah, okay, I'll give it a shot. And then you turn it into a whole career. So, and I mean, to be honest, if I look at myself, my background and where I came from and where I am now, sometimes I kind of think if I met my 19-year-old self in the street, he'd beat the living daylights out of me because he just wouldn't know who I was.
Well, that's actually a question I have for you later on.
I get that question quite often.
Well, it's because, how we evolve. I feel that we're constantly evolving, and the identity of who we were to who we are can be complete polar opposites. I mean, there is some aspects that hold true to us. But, firstly, I will say, I think you're right. It's all about perspective in terms of, I guess not honesty, but fully being sure of what we do and don't like unless we explore that, whether it's the walk in the woods or the fact that I have this natural ability to sell. It's so important. But I suppose I was kind of going to look at your journey, but the interview, the idea is that it flows naturally as possible without me interjecting as I've just done. But the early stages of your life, like what they looked like, what your childhood was like growing up, how you became who you are today. Would you want to tell me a bit about that story, either the 19-year-old self or way back before that?
I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. I've had a very privileged upbringing. I'm not shy about talking about my childhood to a certain point. I was adopted at pretty much birth. There was a lot of complexity about that whole story, which I found out in my 40s, which is another podcast in its own right, probably. But, I was very lucky. My parents worked very hard to get me a good education. I was quite easily distracted. So, they scrimped and saved and found a way to send me to a private school from the age of 7. And I've benefited hugely from that. What that did also enable me, because the school was a little bit traveling. It wasn't a boarding school, but it was quite a long way away, in the sense that it was 20 miles away, and so therefore my school friends were a very different group of people from my home friends, which actually allowed me to be two different characters, and that actually has followed me pretty much through my entire life. The one character, I was at a school which put a lot of pressure on you to perform. It was okay to be quite smart. So whilst before I went to the private school, I was kind of hiding sometimes that I actually knew what was going on a little bit, because it wasn't cool to be clever. And I had a brain in my head and I just wasn't using it. And that's why my parents pulled me out of that system and put me into a private school system where I'd be challenged. And at school, I could be smart, I could be bright, I could be intellectual, I could get good exam results, I could work hard without getting bullied and sort of, hassled. But then on the weekends, I could run around with my mates, get into trouble, get into fights, and sort of learn the more physical aspects of life, and to be honest, the more real aspects of life, and the survival instinct. So I've kind of been very lucky in the sense that I have two very strong characters within me. I don't see them as different. This is not talking I'm schizophrenic with two dual personalities. I don't have dual personalities. Everything I've done in my life has made me the person and character that I am today. But I do have different perspectives. I have come from the streets on the weekends, and the smart intellectual side during the week. And throughout my career, getting into working on nightclub doors, getting into bodyguarding, doing cage fighting, the very physical aspects of life have been very important to me. But likewise, becoming a chartered accountant and ultimately becoming a partner in PwC, and sort of working in that environment has also been equally important. And they don't exist separately. They exist together.
Wow. Wow. And is there one that is stronger than the other, or is it just Clark Kent, and Superman?
It's definitely not Clark Kent and Superman. It's more definitely, but it's a really good question, and I like to think that I'm quite self-aware, and the area of my self-awareness is that if I suppress one of those aspects, it comes back. And if, for example, there was a period in my life where I was mainly doing physical stuff, I was mainly doing bodyguarding work, door work, debt collecting, and sort of cage fighting and things like that. So I was living a very physical life, and I started overthinking a lot, and my brain was almost protesting that it wasn't getting used. So I'd be in a bodyguarding situation. I'd be seeing problems where they didn't really exist. My risk management focus in that aspect of my life started to drift a little bit. And then likewise, when I was training to be a chartered accountant, it's not easy. I was having to put the hours in, because whilst I say about having intellect, I'm not the smartest person in the room by a very, very long stretch. I have to work to excel. And when I was training to be a chartered accountant, your friends are going out on the weekend, you're studying.
Yeah.
You're working in an environment where you're working long days, and then you go home and have to study for a couple of hours. And in that environment, I wasn't hitting the gym. I wasn't sort of getting any kind of physical exercise as such. I was feeling I wasn't eating healthily, and all of the things which you're supposed to do, I wasn't doing. And I started to find myself feeling angry and feeling aggressive, and I'd be in a meeting and I'd be like, "Ah," and I could feel myself getting anger, and that balance is therefore needed.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware if I'm starting to go a little bit too much one way, or starting to go a little bit too much the other way, of just readdressing that balance. And it was a coach that I had a few years ago, in fact, 10, 15 years ago, who got me to start thinking, instead of, I used to talk about myself as Gav A and Gav B, and it was him who said, no, there's no Gav A, Gav B, there's Gav, and what you are today is the sum of all of that. And my people sometimes call it superpower, just to what are you famous for kind of thing. Sometimes my superpower is the ability to draw on one aspect, so a bodyguarding story to help explain a complex financial instrument. Those kind of things
Incredible.
helps me do what I do now.
And that is like that is so incredible. Yeah, I suppose, you know, personally speaking, when I look at my journey of knowing that I have autism and ADHD, and there's that term people tend to say, you know, you're a chameleon when you're trying to fit into a neurotypical society when you're neurodivergent, and you have this identity that may not be your authentic self. I I remember listening to someone speak recently, and they said, "But what if that person is now part of you? Like you can't just completely tear away something and say, okay, that's not part of me anymore, and because that is like she is who I am today, and without her, I'm not. So, and she definitely draws in an awful lot of experience to to help me today. So I absolutely love that and appreciate that, because I know psychotherapy speaking, you know, sometimes we say, okay, that that brain, that chatter, sometimes we need to listen to it and sometimes we don't, and we need to be able to dissect to what is valid and what is not.
Yeah.
So I think that's brilliant. Yeah, I really love on that. And I do think that is a superpower to be able to draw from that experience and bring it into your work environment, because not many can do that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I find a little bit strange, I still don't understand why I do this, and I've read up on it and things like that, and I've got a few theories. But one of the things I find interesting is when I meet new people. So one of the things I do as a job is I stand on stage in front of 600 people, 1,000 people, or whatever, or I deliver training. I have no problem with that at all. I get nervous, as does everybody, a little bit butterflies in the stomach, but that adrenaline, I surge on it. And, I have a reputation for being quite good at public speaking and being on stage. But you put me in small groups of people, and I will tell them that I'm an ex nightclub doorman before I tell them I'm a partner in PwC. I will tell them that I'm an ex bodyguard before I tell them that I'm a chartered accountant. I will talk more comfortably about my physical side of me, my personality, than my mental intellectual side. And I still don't know why I do it. And even when I try not to do it, it becomes a long-standing joke. My wife and I talk about this occasionally, and she's like, "Yeah, you did it again." And it's kind of like, people who meet me very briefly. So if it's one of her social groups, or her sports groups or what have you, and I go along for just to sort of like meet them for a dinner or something, she said afterwards, people think I work in security or rugby coaching or something along those lines. And she goes, no, he's actually a partner in PwC. That really, really, and he was quite quiet, and he's a public speaker for a living. It's like, really? So I don't understand why I do that. Whether it's just my comfort zone, whether I'm controlling the way that people think, it's a really weird thing. But I've talked to my wife, and I talk about it, as I said, quite frequently. But it's a very interesting thing that my default is to talk about the physical side of my life. Maybe it's because I think it's more interesting. I don't know.
Well,
But weird.
I was going to say there, do you think that, I mean, so seven, you went to private school. So that's, I mean, a lot happened before you were seven. You were saying there was bullying going on in school for your intellectual abilities. Do you think that may play an impact on why you still play that down?
And bullying is a really strange thing, I think, and again, I've got to be careful what I say, because obviously bullying is horrific. But when I was in primary school and I was getting bullied, I didn't realize I was getting bullied. And I think there must be a lot of kids out there who are getting bullied, but they don't see it as being bullied. They just see it as normal. It's just the way the world works. It's the establishment of a pecking order. We look at it now and go, oh, that was bullying, or that was this, that was that. And I think a lot of labels get attributed to things. And obviously, at the one end where it is, again, I don't want to say proper bullying, because I can't think of the word, but
Yeah.
when it's more the news headline grabbing kind of type of situation. But I think there's a lot of scope for what is bullying before you get labelled as a bully. So I was bullied at school before I went to private school. And even was at private school to a point, but it wasn't bullying in the sense of the word. It was like Mickey taking. It was a bit of like nickname being given. I was sort of, smarty pants. It's like, it wasn't bullying. I didn't go home and cry about it, but the effect it had on me was to just not put my hand up first. And, I feel very strongly for kids that don't want to put their hand up in class because they don't want to be the one who everyone goes, oh, you always know the right answer. And I think sometimes teachers don't help, and many teachers do help. And I think as bullying is on the kind of like the school agenda, much more so since, we're talking here the 1970s, very different world.
Yeah, of course.
I think there are kids out there even now who just don't want to put their hand up in class, not because of what we would say is bullying, not something that would bring parents into the school to talk to teachers and to get something fixed. It's just that little bit of name calling, that little bit of kind of things that go on quietly behind the scenes that you wouldn't tag as bullying, but it actually is, because it changes your behavior. And I was one of those kids. I just wasn't putting my hand up, even though I knew the answer.
And I think what you're saying there is just so valid, because, well, firstly, what I'll say is, to me personally, you're minimizing your experience, and what would have happened for you would have been very difficult. And I know my daughter's almost 2. If she was 5, 6, 7 and experiencing that, I would not be happy for her having to go through that. And I know you grew up in an era, as did I, where, that was quite the norm. Whereas now we come to realize that because it's not seen as a big trauma, something if we've been in a car accident or something along them lines, because it seems so subtle, people think, it's something small, it's not significant, where in fact it is very significant to who we are today, because they call it small t trauma. And hearing that over and over, there's a reason at that age you had that awareness to go, oh no, not answering that. So, and perhaps that's why this other identity is the one that you're more comfortable with, because it's helped you protect yourself. There's never been a need to protect yourself from bullying from the physical aspects of yourself, but where the intellectual part, you feel that maybe you play that down a lot. That's just my perspective on it.
It could well be. It could well be. I mean, I've gone through the thought process about, is it imposter syndrome or something along those lines, where I don't feel that I'm capable of doing the job that I do, which deep down I kind of know that I am capable. But yeah, is it that kind of self-doubt? I mean, also I think sometimes, maybe I think about making other people feel comfortable. So, I'm a big guy, I'm 120 kilos, rugby player, etc. I'm quite a physical presence. And I do sometimes think it almost puts people at ease that I'm a physical guy. Back in my younger days, I used to play down the fact I was intelligent at all. There was guys I used to work the doors with and things like that who would be absolutely shocked to think of me working in a suit in an office. Because that just wasn't the character that they saw all the time. So I think we all play roles at different times, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think as long as you keep it in balance and keep it in check. But that's why I always struggle when people push on like the authenticity side of things, because I don't think many people know actually what is their authentic self.
Yes,
and they say, oh, you need to be authentic. It's like, I am being authentic.
Yeah.
You just agree that that's the way I should be.
Yeah.
And that's why I was saying honesty is a flexible thing. And again, I have to be, and I've been thinking about that since I said it, that could easily get misunderstood. I don't mean dishonesty is okay. What I mean is there's a famous quote by Voltaire that says, I have no morals, yet I'm a very moral person. Okay. Now, I'm not well read. I have never read Voltaire. It was actually from a TV show called Sharp back in the 90s. But it just clicked with me. And to me, that I have no morals, yet I'm a very moral person is all about your personal value system. So when other people look at me, they may think that I am dishonest, for example, but to me, I'm honest to myself. I have a line that I will not cross. I am fundamentally at a grassroots level honest with people. I talk straight. However, when my wife says, does this dress look nice on me? I say yes without looking, because I know that that's not a time to be honest. It's a time to be a loving husband and supportive.
Or without looking that dress looks good on her because a bin bag would look good on her.
Exactly. Thank you for saving me on that one in case she sees this. But it is one of those things that, the concept of honesty being a flexible thing to me is that sometimes people need the pep talk more than they need to be told the truth. And by giving the pep talk, it might enable the truth to come out through a coaching or some other way of intervening. But if someone's messed up, usually the last thing that they want to hear is their boss telling them, oh, you really, really messed up on this. They actually want to be told, don't worry about it. We'll fix it. Let's look at this. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But right now, go and have a cup of coffee. Let's go for a chat. Let's talk about the weather. What are you doing at the weekend? They need the pep talk more than they need the honesty at that point in time. So honesty is a flexible thing as long as you are true to your own values. And to me, making someone feel supported, making someone feel special, making someone feel good is equally as important as giving them the home truth about a particular dress that I might not think looks amazing or what have you. So I think sometimes you have to be honest with a touch of flexibility, as long as you're being true to yourself and that you're not harming other people by being maybe slightly dishonest about something.
Thank you. And the dress looks good.
My wife always looks amazing.
So it does matter.
Exactly. We have the conversation. Is like, I'll always say to her, "How do I look?" And she's like, "Yeah, no, that's fine." She never even asks me because she always looks amazing. So I'm a very lucky man.
How do you think then early years, then going into your teens, your early career, have influenced your career today, where you are? How do you think that has brought you? Like, what were the stepping stones there that brought Gavin to PwC today?
Wow, that's a big question that we could spend about 4.5 hours exploring, I suppose. The honest answer is I don't know. I think I know, but I don't really know. I think when you look at your own personal development, you develop a value system. Now, let's face it, 20 years ago, no one was talking about values. No one was talking, it wasn't a subject that came up. Corporate entities didn't have values, that they didn't recruit on that basis, etc. But over the last 20 years, we're seeing more people, more organizations becoming much more aware of the values of an organization. And as a chartered accountant, I got taught ethics. Now, I think you've got to be a bit of an idiot if you get the wrong answer on an ethical question. Someone offers you £5,000 in a brown envelope under the table to do this. It's like, you've got to be pretty stupid to not realize that's wrong.
Yeah.
So ethics is not something you can learn. You can learn the rules on when you have to report something, when you don't have to report something. But actually, for me, ethics is at the heart of your value system. What is it that you believe in? I personally have a very strong belief that what you say, you do. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Very simple. What I say I'm going to do, I do it.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm not perfect. Nobody is. And I might have the intention to do it, but not quite execute it properly or whatever, and might not achieve the exact goal. But I always like to say that if I say to someone, I will do this, I will back you up. I'm not two-faced. I'm not going to stab someone in the back. I will back them up. I have a rule with some of my team that if I'm not available for whatever reason, if I'm traveling or if I'm in the classroom or what have you, and they have to make a decision, when I come out, I will back that decision 100%. I might need to take them for a quiet conversation where we talk about what other options might have been available and maybe what they could have thought about. So it goes back to the thought process. But I trust them to make that decision, and I will not counteract that decision unless I absolutely have to. There's always a scenario where you might absolutely have to. But at the end of the day, I try and train my team. I try and work with my team so they understand how to approach problems and scenarios, and what they come up with, I will back 100%. And that is something I learned on the doors.
Wow.
Again, it's a very, and I won't name names, but there are a number of scenarios in the 1990s in nightclubs that I've stood on the door around the country, in the UK, and there are things going on that result in it being physical. And there are things that go on that become physical, which are absolutely started by the nightclub security team. But you're a team. You back each other up. You wade in, you deal with it. Afterwards, you might take that guy to one side and say, look, you were out of order then. You shouldn't have said that, or you shouldn't have thrown that first punch, or you shouldn't have done this, that, and the other. But in the moment, you back them up 100%. Afterwards, you talk about it and you maybe say, look, mate, seriously, you were out of order. You should not have done that. You started that. You caused that situation. But when the aftermath happens, you're 100% supportive. you've got to back it up. That's your job. You've got to have that trust in the people you work with, and in that environment, trust is pretty much everything. Like I say, the 1990s is very different from today. You know, the 1990s, it was only nightclubs that had doormen. It was pre everyone having a little blue license on their sleeve. It was a very different working environment, shall we say. A prison record was a badge of honour rather than a prohibiting you from doing the work. So it's a very different group of people, and trust was everything. You know, when you look at a prison system, you know, the whole principle of grassing, you know, you do not grass. Even if something horrible is happening to you, you do not grass. That is the unwritten rule of being in prison. You know, there are different elements to the way that people behave that in a different society is frowned upon, but actually in that environment, that is the way you have to be.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it comes back to the honesty is a fluid thing. So I would perhaps, well, I would behave differently in my job in PwC as a partner. I have massive ethical responsibilities to the firm, to my qualification, and to my team. If I'm working in a nightclub door situation, I would behave differently from how I behave in the office. I'm authentic in both situations and both scenarios, and you have to be. So I think my teenage years taught me a lot, and dare I say, and anybody in my situation is going to completely agree with me and hate having to agree with me. But I learned so much from my parents that I never really told them I learned. You know, never really acknowledged at that time. But even now, I say, oh yeah, well, yeah, my dad taught me this, my mum taught me that, and things. And I never really acknowledged it at the time. I don't think any child does. But you know, here I am in my 50s, you know, and I can't help sometimes but think, yeah, maybe I should have listened a little bit more than I actually did, and I might have learned things a little bit quicker. So yeah, my teenage years were very informative. I had some behavioural issues caused by various different things, and the relationship with my parents wasn't great, as most teenagers isn't. But that taught me a lot of life lessons. It taught me to be independent. It taught me to be resilient. It taught me to be robust in what I believe, and it taught me a value system that, whilst has been modified over the years, is still fairly similar to what it was when I was hitting 1920.
I really love, you know, the fact that building that tribe and that loyalty and that stood the test of time with you. That seems like a very strong value. You know, having someone's back, and obviously highlighting, you know, where there may be wrongdoings, but not doing that publicly, just respecting that person in the moment and
Yeah,
holding that.
but I mean, but don't get me wrong. You know, at the end of the day, personal development comes through. You know, there are some situations where you have to intervene and actually tell that person, okay, that you need to stop that now.
Yeah.
And you know, I probably, as I've got older, I do that more. You know, in my professional life, I have responsibility for not just the one person I'm talking to, but for the families of the 170 people that ultimately report through to me. And I have that obligation. You know, I have to come to work every day and be better than I was the day before, because otherwise that 170 families may not be able to be financially supported. So I take a lot of responsibility for helping and supporting the team and trying to keep my role as or do my role as well as possible. So I put quite a lot of pressure on myself to perform. Likewise, similarly with my home life, it's very much the same. I feel very responsible. I take a lot of responsibility on my shoulders about the people I'm with and that I care about, my families and my, you know, my family, my own family, and then my family that I work with. To the point where sometimes I maybe don't put myself first in things. We joke about work-life balance. I work so that my family can live. And I do take a lot of responsibility on, as do every partner. I mean, we were at a partner meeting, we were talking about the role of a partner, and the number of partners in PwC that have exactly the same views as me, that they are responsible for the livelihoods of a much bigger team than just their own sort of like family. And that's one of the reasons why I like working here, because that is one of the values amongst the leadership. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, so you feel that you have that understanding within the team you work with,
Yeah.
which you don't always get. It sounds like a huge weight to carry.
Not really, because it's easy, because I enjoy it. You know, I mean, it sounds like, oh, you know, give me the cape, build the statue, you know, superhero Gav saving the day. Look, that's not what it is at all. What it basically boils down to is I take pride in what I do. I'm not a perfectionist, but I do have high standards. And I've been there. I've been the 20-year-old who comes into work on a morning and kind of goes, I don't really know what I'm doing. It's like, my job is to help bring them on so that they do know what they're doing. And I'm not doing that from an altruistic point. I definitely get a benefit out of it myself. I'm very well financially rewarded in my job, and I love working with the people that I work with. So it's not a significant burden to carry. It's the nature of my personality. I think things like that only become a burden if it's not your natural state. So if you're having to work hard to do that, then yes, it becomes a burden. If I think that's your natural thing, and I think the process within, let's say, firms like PwC and certainly PwC, the process to become a partner is much more about your behaviours than it is about your technical capabilities. It's much more about leading your team than it is about delivering one project to a particular client. It's much more about your ability to hold and build relationships than it is your knowledge of technical tax treatments or technical accounting treatments or something. So I think the person, it's like, people that go into teaching have a certain character. People that go into retail have a certain character. People that go into customer service have a certain character. People that go into the medical profession have a certain character. I think people that go into leadership, wherever that is, also have to have that same character. Otherwise, it's hard work. If you're not naturally comfortable helping other people, it's very hard. I can't imagine for a second what being a nurse working ridiculous hours for very little pay. I can't imagine that job because I couldn't do it because I don't have that character. Whereas, I've got cousins who are working in the medical profession, one's an ex-nurse, and she's amazing. And I'm like, how do you do this? And she says, yeah, but it's not a job. It's just something that she does that's in her character. And I think, that gets increasingly important.
I couldn't agree more with it. I was literally hanging on every word there because, it's wonderful to hear that you have that in PwC, whereas leadership, it's not about, maybe your abilities, but it's about your leadership, about, I suppose for me, it's seeing people and understanding them and that part where you say it's your natural capabilities. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I'll probably talk on this about all the other things I'm listening to that I found value from. But someone said, look, I do 55 hours a week. I don't feel like I do 55 hours a week. The work-life balance is when, if you're not enjoying it, if it's not something that comes natural to you, that you can still have your family life, you're not bringing work stresses home. That, I remember my father, he worked ridiculous hours, but he got up bursting for work every morning. And on his holidays, he'd be thinking, but he'd still be there with the family. So the stress of work never impacted the family, and vice versa. It all just, I guess, interlinked with each other. And I think it's very important to say, because a work-life balance is important, but it's different for everyone. And if you're able to work with your natural capabilities, that old saying of then you never work a day in your life. And I guess with organizations, for me personally, where I look at neurodivergent affirming is you look at finding individuals' natural capabilities and supporting them in that area, and the workloads that they find challenging, that you give that to someone else who may find that area a lot more easy, I guess, for want of a better word.
Absolutely. I mean, I was speaking in a panel session at a university in Dubai a couple of weeks ago, and it was an academic panel, and I was the sort of sitting there as the person from the real world of industry, and the question kind of came up about sort of helping students prepare for the workplace. And I said, there really is a very simple secret to having work-life balance. And if you look at the work aspects of it, it's find something that you're good at, find something you enjoy, find nice people to work with, and then find a way to get paid for it. And if you can do those four things, it's not about work-life balance, it's just about having a good life. And I think people sometimes forget that. And I've had jobs where I haven't had all four. I've been paid ridiculous amounts of money, but I've hated going to work in the morning. And you can survive at it for a certain amount of time. But I use the word survive at it. You don't thrive in it, you just survive. And you mop away your tears with your paycheck. That's great if that's what you want to do. But that's not really sustainable. I've been very lucky in my life. I've had 4 or 5 different types of jobs where I've had all four, and I'm in one now. I mean, yes, I'm well remunerated. You know, partners in big four firms, we get paid well, but I don't do it for the money. I don't think to myself, oh, if I work a little bit harder, I might get a better pay rise. I do it for the love of the job and the people that I work with. And I hope that comes out. I mean, and again, depending on how you edit this, I don't know, but it's like, I'm not as arrogant as perhaps I'm coming across. I don't necessarily think I'm a good leader. I try hard to be the best leader that I can be for my team. You'd have to speak to them to know whether I'm any good at it or not. And I'm sure every single one of them will say nice things. And then if you drill down, they'll start saying the things that I get wrong. And I get things wrong. And I encourage them to talk to me about it. Some of them do, some of them probably don't. Some of them may not feel comfortable to highlight areas of weakness. But my thing is, I get up every day and I try and think, how can I be a better leader today than I was yesterday? How can I be a better public speaker today than I was yesterday? How can I be a better father today than I was yesterday? How can I be a better husband today than I was yesterday? You know, I think anybody who walks around thinking that they're doing everything right, I think is well, they're wrong. You can't be that person. And some days I'm a better person at work and I'm a worse person at home. And then some days I'm a better person at home and I'm a worse person at work. I think self-awareness is important, that you go home and you go, yeah, I was actually a bit of an idiot today. Or you wake up the next morning and you just turn to my wife and go, you know, Han, I'm really sorry. I don't know what was wrong with me last night. I was in a bad mood. I'm sorry for snapping at you about this, that, and the other. And, you know, she sort of puts down the carving knife and says, okay, I forgive you. You know, these situations happen.
Of
You know,
course,
and I think
it's
you've got to be
nice.
realistic.
And I think, accountability is so important. We can, when I suppose in neurodivergence, where we look at, executive function, where you can be reactive sometimes. I certainly know with me and my husband, sometimes things are said and it's like, well, oh, wait. I didn't mean it the way it sounded, or, I just didn't think that through before it came out. And when you're self-aware, and I guess when you and your partner, and I guess you build a wonderful tribe around you there within work, is when everyone's aware and you can hold yourself accountable, there's a lot more respect. And I think that makes you a good leader, because you don't expect that you're the best. You don't anticipate every day that you're the best. You go, you know what? I'm going to give it a bit more today. I'm going to give it a bit more. And I think that's what makes great leadership. Leadership is that you show the human side of yourself, that you're not robotic, that you are flawed, and that every day is a new day and we can start and learn a little bit more. I think that's very valuable and important. And I absolutely commend you for that.
And I think we learn, as you go along. I wasn't born a good leader. I wasn't born a leader. I've learned, and I've been very lucky. I've worked for some exceptional leaders, and I've worked for some not exceptional leaders, and I've probably learned as much from what not to do as I've learned what to do. And even the exceptional leaders, they themselves will admit that sometimes they react in certain ways. And I'm not going to lie. If I'm in a bad mood, my team know I'm in a bad mood. They discreetly call it eggshell days, when they feel they have to walk on eggshells. I pretend I don't know that's what they call it, but they call it eggshell days. And I'm fairly sure sometimes I come into the office growling and a bit grumpy, and someone will kind of like a WhatsApp message will probably go around the team saying, "Oh, eggshell day." And then I notice that people leave me alone for a few hours and wait until I've had a cup of coffee and a sandwich and maybe and then I'll start talking to them, and I'm sure that message goes around and say, "Yeah, eggshell over," or something along those lines. I'm sure that happens. So I think you can't be perfect.
No.
All the time. I don't even claim to be good all the time. I just am me. But I'd like to think that I'm approachable to the point where, and my team do this, will come up to me and say, "Gav, just not just no, you're being an idiot," and it's kind of okay. Yeah, I'm in a bad mood for various reasons. Fine, I'm just going to put my headphones on and just do some work for an hour and just snap myself out of it a little bit.
So you find
my wife is exceptional at that as well.
If someone, I suppose, comes to you and says, you're being an idiot, you can take that well. You don't go, "Hey."
I mean, do I take it well? Again, people talk about friendships and things. I have very few close friends in the sense that most people don't really have those. So there's one guy that I work with. I used to work with him on the doors. He is probably the one person that can basically tell me to shut up or can tell me to back away or whatever, and I'll take it completely from him. I will take it from my wife, but I'll go and do the washing up and I'll be and I'll
It's
take
some
it
of
from
it that she can hear slightly. That you
just
kind of
loud enough
want,
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
she knows that I'm not
You
happy.
never do this.
I'll concede, but I'm conceding under protest. But I mean, she can turn around and say, okay, like, are you okay? Or kind of like, what's wrong? And of course, I do the classic thing. I say, no, everything's fine, because that's what we do. And I have people I work with. Some people can say, Gav, okay, the way you spoke then was you were too much. But there are a lot of people that I will take it from under advisement. So I will be defensive in the moment, but then I think about it overnight and I come back the next day and go, yeah, you were right. Sorry, I was a bit defensive. And I think that is an area that I have to work on personally. I mean, I'm in a situation. I mean, your introduction said I've trained over sort of 25,000 sort of people. It's actually, I think we did the maths a couple of weeks ago. It's even more than that. It's a lot more than that. And so you've got to bear in mind, I live in a world where I'm getting feedback on a daily basis from delegates, participants, and 90% of it is fantastic feedback and it's really refreshing. Of course, I ignore all of that and I only read the one feedback form out of a class that says bad things and negative things. And I think we as human beings might say, oh, yes, I like honest feedback. But the reality is I don't think many people actually do like it in the moment. I think you learn from it by reflecting.
Yes, yes.
So I try to always thank someone for their feedback, and I try not to be defensive, but to try is to fail. So I do sometimes argue a little bit with what they've said, but then I'll always go away and think about it, and then I try to go back to them the next day and say, okay, I've thought about what you said, and okay, I agree. My old boss actually realised, and she even said to me, that if ever she wanted to pick me up on something, or wanted me to change the way I was doing something, or she wanted me to work on something in a different way, she'd always tell me at 5 o'clock in the evening. Because she said if she told me at 11 o'clock in the morning, I'd get nothing done all day. Because I'd be like, and the conversation would keep going on WhatsApp or whatever throughout the day where I was being a bit disagreeing. Where she said she realised that I needed the overnight to think about it. So if she spoke to me at like 5 o'clock, I would be immediately defensive and go, oh, well, I don't agree. I think I've done this. And she'd be, okay, go away and think about it. And then I'll see you tomorrow morning. And then 9 o'clock the following morning, she'd come in and go, morning, Gavin, and say, yeah, sorry, you're right. I thought about it last night and I think you're right. I do need to do this, that, and the other. So she just learned that the way to handle me is to give me negative feedback just as I'm about to leave. Then I've got the opportunity to think about it. Yeah, and I think
Someone else has to deal with you.
yeah, my wife, I think, does it as well. She'll say something to me just before she goes out, knowing that by the time she comes back, I'll have rationalized it, made and have dealt with it in my own kind of like way. But I think that's part of working with people that you know and trust, is you learn how to deal with each other. And I do that similar sort of thing with some of my team. There are some people I know who need not micromanaging, but they need that regular catch up. There are some people who I know will just walk up to my desk. One of my team will consistently phone me at 8, 9 o'clock at night with their thoughts of the day or the week, which is absolutely fine. I have no problems with that. I have one person who would freak out if I put a meeting in their diary once a week to catch up on things. That's just not the way that they and I work together. So I think, going back to your very first question on the neurodiversity, I think having people who think differently, but also reflecting in yourself how best to work with people who come from very different perspectives in their thought process is then equally as important. It's not about everyone should adjust for the way I work. I have to adjust for the way that they work and things.
And I think I really, really appreciate that, because I was going to lead on to that after this. It's so valuable that as a leader, that is how you approach people, knowing that each individual, like even, if I put that meeting in that person's calendar, they'll freak out. That's going to impact their life. So you're really emotionally intelligent in that area of knowing each individual team member you have, which it is so, so important. And they obviously know you when they know it's eggshell morning. I'm not going to say eggshell day, because you have that ability to turn it around.
Sometimes it's eggshell weeks, but no. I mean, just to kind of caveat that again, I am not. I don't necessarily think I've got high levels of emotional intelligence. I just learn quite quickly. And, having the meeting with somebody and they're sitting there rigid and you say, what's the matter? You say, I'm really worried about what this meeting's about. Am I going to get fired? And you're like, no, you're not getting fired. Well, I just want to talk to you. I said, oh, because when that meeting appeared in my diary, I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And you kind of go, okay, note to self, don't do that. So I don't think it's necessarily me being emotionally connected to my team. I think it's just paying attention and just kind of going, right, okay, when I did that, it didn't work very well. And it then meant I spent 20 minutes of a 30-minute meeting talking them down from quitting or, doing something stupid or whatever, talking them down from whatever mental state they were in. And only then having 10 minutes to brief them on the thing I actually needed to talk to them about. And you kind of go, okay, that didn't set the right environment for the conversation I actually needed to have with them. So maybe next time I'll just get to this and say, oh, have you got a minute? And we'll go and have that conversation then. So I don't necessarily think it is emotional intelligence. I think it's maybe just intelligence or maybe just paying attention to things and having people around you that tell you straight. So I one of the team that works for me, she is exceptional at putting me on the right path. And I mean exceptional. She'll say, you might want to have a word with so and so. I think they're going through something at the moment, and I haven't necessarily spotted it. So I have the kind of relationship with her that I trust her implicitly, and I've coached her and helped her develop over those years. But she will highlight things that I haven't spotted. She has got a very, very high level of emotional intelligence, and I think if I was being completely honest, I probably benefit a little bit from her emotional intelligence because sometimes she'll tell me you might want to soften your approach with this person, or this person's a bit intimidated by you, and things like that. I mean, we had one member of staff here when she first joined. I mean, she actually hid in a photocopier room for about 20 minutes because I was having a conversation with someone that she wanted to talk to, and she kind of walked into the space, realized I was talking to her, and she was so intimidated by me that she just carried on walking, went into the photocopier room. And I remember the moment. I remember seeing her walk into the photocopier room, didn't think anything of it. And then it was about like 20 minutes later, she kind of came out, and I was like, have you been in there the whole 20 minutes? I mean, it is literally a cupboard, and she's not carrying huge amounts of paper. Have you been in there 20 minutes? And then it kind of came out that she didn't feel comfortable. I need to change myself. I need to try to not be that intimidating. Whether I've achieved it or not, you'd probably have to speak to her. I'm sure she'll listen to this podcast and she'll know exactly who she is. It's a long joke in the office about her hiding in the photocopier cupboard, but I think you have to be self-aware, you have to be conscious, but also, like I said, surround yourself with people that think differently. I don't know whether I have a good emotional intelligence. I don't know whether I have a good IQ. I don't know whether I have a good, sort of PQ or any of the other Qs that I read about. Like I said, I just wake up in the morning and I try to be better than I was the day before in whatever aspect has been highlighted or I'm focusing on at that time. But I don't profess to be getting it right. I don't profess to be good at it. What I do seems to work quite well. My team are a very high performing team because of their efforts. If my leadership has got a small percentage of that, then whoopee-doo. I'm happy about that. But actually it comes down to them.
Wow, I think that's very powerful. And having that team around you and that individual that comes to you, I guess it's like your sidekick. We go back to the Superman analogy.
I'm 99% certain she's going to be so unhappy with that, but yes.
Sorry. It's very, very important. So within that, and I guess that's daily, you're demonstrating how you're constantly evolving. How would you say that within PwC that there are neurodivergent affirming practices, and where are the areas you feel that maybe on your journey now, getting better each day, that you might need to bridge that gap a bit?
Look, I mean, I think that PwC is far more progressive than perhaps even a lot of people that work at PwC realizes.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a real attitude of caring for people. But at the end of the day, we are a commercial organisation and we need to pay salaries and we need to do this, that and the other. And some decisions are hard decisions and some decisions are kind of like, made based on the dollar. Let's be honest. But in the context of that, I really feel that PwC as a firm, and especially in the Middle East, that they do genuinely care about the team, about the people. There's various initiatives, some formal, but lots of informal initiatives that are encouraged, and things. But to me, it's when I talk to other partners from around the business, and look, I'm not going to lie, every organization has got a few people that are exceptional and a few people that are not exceptional, and then a big chunk of people who are doing the best they can on a day-to-day basis. And I think generally I see within PwC, the vast majority, almost all the partners that I meet, are doing the best they can to deliver on all of their KPIs and all of their goals, but also to do it in a way that brings their team along with them. Every single partner I talk to talks very, very positively and nicely about their teams. There isn't really any sort of side of them that they feel their team is letting them down. Everybody works very hard. Everyone does their best to develop the people around them. And it's very evident when partners get together and talk, and I do elements of sort of like partner training at time to time. I do elements of working on like sort of helping on strategy facilitation and things from time to time. The message that I would say to people is I wish I could record some of the things that people say. And it's not all about profits. It's not all about revenue. It's not all about the financial returns. It's about the people. And people is one of the key areas of PwC's focus, developing their people, looking after their people. We have, again, Middle East being what it is, we have an exceptional medical package available that's there for all of the staff, which includes a lot of mental health elements, which, let's face it, that's kind of some of the expensive stuff in healthcare. But our package includes huge amounts of stuff, even down to, and this again, I'm not really going to name names, this takes us in a different weird way, but I was going through all of the medical benefits, because every time I just like to leaf through and just sort of see what's there. And the health insurance that the firm has arranged for the staff includes bereavement leave. So if a close family member passes, the health insurance will cover a week's time off. They'll cover your salary for a week. So if the firm, and the firm is very generous on that as well, but if you need that extra time, you can even claim it on your health insurance. And that's something that the firm has put in place. They've chosen that healthcare provider because of things like that. So I do feel, and it sounds like I'm singing to the company hymn sheet, and anybody watching this who knows me knows that that's not what I do. I'm saying it because I believe in it, but I do think that PwC genuinely cares about their people. We have a lot of people whose entire roles, I mean, one of the partners in the academy who sits alongside me, his job is the people role. And he will stand up to other people if they think that they're putting too much pressure on or that something's being unfair. And, we're encouraged to speak out about it. We have our own sort of, reporting hotline, our ethics hotline, if someone feels that a partner is behaving in a way that is inappropriate or being too demanding or being bullying or something. There is a whole anonymous reporting structure, a team of people to help and support. So there's very strong kind of like, it's okay to blow the whistle if there's inappropriate behavior. There's very good structures for supporting people who may be going through some personal life traumas or having work problems or what have you. So I do feel that the resources are there. We have mental first aiders, not only physical first aiders who can give you paracetamol or stick a plaster, but we have mental first aiders. It's like, that blows my mind in itself.
Yeah.
People that I know I can go and talk to who have had training to identify maybe the early signs of depression or the early signs of someone crying for help a little bit. And I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's
it's absolutely so valuable, really, really important. And I guess then I suppose that looking at you as a leader, because it sounds like you have a great team there around you, but sometimes there's a sense that leadership can be lonely. Is there anything or any area that you really struggle with that you would say as a leader?